thrilled to have everyone here and to be talking about such an important topic, but also very often talked about topic at Cannes and this year in general. But before we dive into that, I just want to say I'm Katie. I lead marketing at Onyx by Outbrain, and I'm thrilled to be joined by our excellent panelists. If you guys want to quickly give an introduction.
Sure, my name's Phil. I work at Haleon, so we're the manufacturer of Sensodyne and Panadol, and my responsibilities in the global team looking after how we measure the effectiveness of digital marketing.
I'm Mia Libby. I am the Global SVP of Tech and Enterprise at the Wall Street Journal, so I handle all advertising that basically is not consumer or financial services.
Martin Bryan, I'm the Global Chief Sustainability Officer for IPG Mediabrands. We're one of the large holdcos supporting our clients in media planning and buying.
And it's a great group of people, obviously. So super excited to have you guys here. And as I said, we're going to be talking about sustainability and the role of sustainability in advertising today. I think that that's been very widely talked about, so we want to take a slightly different approach to the conversation and talk about both marketing effectiveness as well as responsibility as it relates to sustainability. So how can we make smarter decisions with how we're spending media and how we're reaching audiences in order to enable a more sustainable ecosystem? But how can we also be thoughtful about responsibility? Where are we investing? Where are we deciding to bring dollars to? And how are we supporting various media and journalistic outlets today and in the future? So the intersection of those two topics is where I think we're going to have an amazing discussion. So I'd like to start with you, Mia, just because I know in our conversations we've talked a lot about the research that you guys have reviewed around the value of the news audience and the mindset of consumers reading news. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's no secret that in advertising, many brands have decided to move away from advertising adjacent to news. Basically, nearly every brand has some kind of brand safety mandate, and every brand should have a brand safety mandate. But my issue with the term brand safety is that it's sort of this expansive spectrum all the way from hate speech to a fact-driven story about who's running in the next US election. Those things are not the same. They should not be categorized in the same way. And so we, with some other news partners, partnered with Statwell to do research on the impact of running ads adjacent to news versus sports, entertainment, sort of good business stories. And what they did was they interviewed 50,000 people across the United States and came up with the top 8 key attributes for advertising, everything from brand lift to purchase intent, everything that the main KPIs everyone's looking for when they advertise, and tested those KPIs across sports content, entertainment content, good business content, and then also tested it against crime, Biden, Trump, the war in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, sort of things that just naturally we know most brands want to suppress adjacencies to. And it came back that there was virtually no difference in the scores on those key attributes between sports and entertainment and all of those news stories. They were exactly the same across the board. And then what's more is they identified this group of people, 11% of the entire audience that they labeled news junkies. And so those are people who only consume news. They do not consume sports content. They do not consume entertainment content. They only consume news content. And so if you, as a marketer, have decided, I will not run in any news-based organization, or I will not run adjacent to news, you have effectively cut off 11% of the population in the US. Mm-hmm. So that was, I think that was incredibly illuminating. And you basically done it for no reason. There is no change in what that adjacency affords you.
And I think the data is a really important aspect here, because what we're really talking about is reaching consumers and
Yes.
making sure that brands are looking at audience holistically and where am I going to get the most impact when I'm reaching an audience. And that, of course, is going to make campaigns more effective. And if we're more effective, we're going to build a more sustainable future,
Yes.
because we're not wasting media dollars and energy as a result, which is a perfect segue to your role, Phil. So owning marketing effectiveness at Halion, how do you really think about how you reach your audience and where you invest in different channels? What does that look like for you?
So firstly, you give me way too much credit. I don't unfortunately own marketing effectiveness. It's a village. I'm sure in your businesses it's a village as well. There's no one owner. So our media team has rolled out relatively recently a globally consistent framework for all of our markets, the media value methodology. That is a composite metric made up of different dimensions and metrics that can be classified into 4 areas. So context, values, reach, and quality. If you were to draw a Venn diagram, you can imagine there's a lot of overlap between some of those categorizations: quality, context, values, and quality. And what that score enables us to do is kind of track performance over time against this composite metric, and then correlate that effectiveness score, that effectiveness index, with business outcomes. Because, like most CPG companies, a lot of what you're optimizing towards is a proxy. We sell 90% of our products in stores, 10% online. That 10% we get limited visibility of, so we have to optimize towards certain things available to us on the platforms, and then do that correlation analysis. And one good example of the evolution of that has been attention metrics. So using attention metrics to understand kind of pre and post, and how we're moving towards kind of consumer-centric view of the consumption of media, not just viewability but attention. And yeah, we're seeing really positive trajectory around those markets that are moving the needle on an effectiveness score, whether it's campaign or brand level, and business outcomes. And context is a big part of that. There's various different methodologies for how you would score yourself on context, the number of impressions that you place in contextually relevant environments, maybe you do PMPs or programmatic guaranteed with news brands. But yeah, that's definitely context, is definitely part of the model. In the essence that we understand that contextual relevancy, not always for an adjacency, you don't need to put Voltron in running every day, but you can put it in places that people are thinking about wellness and exercise, is definitely a driver of performance for us in let's say, this global model we have.
That makes a ton of sense, and I think that, again, this is a perfect segue into Martin's world, which is we're looking at effectiveness and how we reach audiences and context. How does that relate to how IPG is looking at effectiveness as well as sustainability overall and building towards that more responsible future like we were talking about? I think you guys had some notable news this week as well on the sustainability front. You want to touch on that?
Yeah, well, I'll start with, we sort of live in this philosophy that profitability can be realized through purpose. So sustainability can, in fact, be a driver of successful outcomes, whatever those KPIs are for a client. So one of the things that we've been, again, really focused on is driving that awareness through all of our studies that we conduct through the Magna Media Trials team. So I'll get to the announcement in a moment, but you mentioned something, Phil, that we actually looked at and interrogated in a study recently where we looked at the correlation between attention and climate impact. And what we saw was a very strong correlation between when an ad is actually driving greater attention for consumers, that there is the co-benefit of it actually having a tantamount reduction in emissions. And it makes sense when you think about it, because if you're actually driving attention, you have less clutter on that page. So made for advertising, for example, garnered a lot of adverse attention recently, right? When we removed MFA inventory from our buys, we actually saw a 30% reduction in overall emissions. And that's something that we conducted globally, or I should say in the US, but we're now implementing an inclusion list globally for that. To get to the news now, we talk about measurement. We've not had, as an industry, a consistent means for measurement. And that's changed as of this week. We made the announcement through WFA GARM, through Ad Net Zero, we've collectively been working towards, from the buy side, from the sell side, pretty competitively aligned on these standards. It's a huge accomplishment because a year ago we were talking about it in theory. This year now we have something that we can actually work towards so that there's a common benchmark and that we're all ultimately able to identify how we measure to then reduce. So it's really exciting news.
That is really exciting, and I think it shows how much progress has been made over the last year on this front. What you said about attention is something that we've seen at Onyx by Outbrain as well, is that when you really focus on the moment that you're reaching the consumer as they're deeply engaging with editorial and content, those moments are so much more highly valuable than just super high viewability, high reach, high scale. I think we're as an industry learning that if we can focus more on attention and the consumer experience holistically, we are going to be able to achieve our goals more effectively. But that leads me to the question for the group that I have, which is that all of this seems very logical. We now have measurement frameworks for sustainability. We're all in agreement about attention. We're all in agreement about the value of these audiences. How can we, as a group representing tech, brand, agency, publisher, what are the practical steps you feel the industry now needs to take to actually further move forward to support sustainability and journalistic outlets and really change the mindset around audiences on those outlets?
I should probably let the buyers answer this question, but I'll jump in. Because where I see the breakdown is, here we are in the south of France on these panels talking about the importance of news, the importance of sustainability, I think, like you said, Katie, we're all in agreement, right? And CMOs and heads of agencies, all in agreement. But when it comes time to filter that down to the people who are actually making the buying decisions, I still think there are nerves about it. I don't know, I heard brand safety, it's just safer if I just go with sports. I'm not gonna get fired for putting a sports site on the plan. And so my personal feeling is, and I'd love to hear this from you guys, is that it's going to take some time, but there needs to be some more downward pressure to invest in the right places, and invest in the places that the CMOs on panels are talking about investing in. And then additionally, I think one of the, specifically on the news side, it's tech that's gotten us to where we are, right? It was 2016, I believe, ISIS beheading video, brand ads ran adjacent to it. The brand safety tech industry was born, and it took a very blunt instrument approach to brand safety. Created the longest keyword block lists that just keep growing, and tech, the tech infrastructure is really a big part of why we are where we are. So I think really finding partners there. And you hear the CEO of the Trade Desk has been talking a lot about this and the work that they're doing to revise their technology so that it can be much more inclusive of news, and not use keyword block lists. So I think, to me, those are the two reasons why we haven't seen the conversations we're having here really trickle down to actual dollars.
And I was going to say, from the brand and the agency side, how do you view everything that Mia just covered?
I couldn't agree more, and I think ultimately it has to come back down to, I love the study that you guys conducted. I'm part of that 11%.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about your audience strategy, if you're not effectively connecting with the audiences that are going to drive growth, your high value audiences ultimately have to have a correlation of media that matches where they are. So what we at IPG Mediabrands, again, purpose and profit, we're looking at that continuum. So if you are in fact effectively looking at a campaign and an audience approach and a strategy that's going to drive the results for your client, if you're not reaching that audience where they are and you're not being as inclusive in that media, you're going to fail. So your profitability is going to have an adverse impact.
Yes.
So I don't want to sound like an apologist, but in brands, a lot's been going on. Everyone's been making redundancies. The entire industry's been making redundancies. creates a lot of uncertainty, a lot of change, difficult conditions to make things happen. We've seen, obviously, from an economic perspective, things have been very challenging economically around inflationary pressures. That's kind of put a lot of focus back on pricing as a brand manager. We obviously have had lots of reports about programmatic transparency and a newly releasing report A&A study. So what I'm trying to get to is there's a lot going on, like a lot of things coming at you simultaneously, and that does make change management, which is already a very difficult thing to achieve in a business, even more difficult. That being said, I think putting what's coming out into the hands of the people that can do something with it, the buyers, the agency teams, the media leads within companies is really important, and we need to be asking ourselves, if we're not doing activity-based measurement of emissions, why not? What's stopping us from doing that, and how can we move more quickly to achieve that, so we have the visibility and the granularity to understand, at domain level and publisher level, what is happening, what isn't happening, versus just blanketly applying an index or a proxy to all of our spend. I think it's happening in our business, kind of a little bit removed, but the procurement team's already talking to partners about, are you in line with the EU directives around publishing your emissions? Where are you on your journey for renewable energy? What's going on in terms of your science-based targets? So I think things are moving and happening. It's just change management is very difficult, but that is what change is. So they're the kind of things as buyers and brands can be doing to get to a better place when it comes to understanding the situation to actually make optimizations that really matter.
I'm glad you brought that up too around regulation, because I also think that that's going to be such a critical driver for brand decisioning around where they show up in media. When we look at CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is coming into effect in 2025, I don't think many brands are paying attention to this right now. Because sustainability in media marketing, it's like, what is that? From a materiality standpoint, at Halion, I'm imagining it's quite low. From an impact standpoint, you guys are looking at your production and things that are really difficult in your supply chain to reduce emission-wise. Within media and marketing, you can change it in an afternoon. It's all about optimizations towards the supply path, right? And I think that's something that whenever I have a mic in hand these days, I'm trying to reiterate. It's so important for our industry to understand this is coming. That regulation is being addressed by the framework that I talked about. And then, we have, as you mentioned, those criteria that we're looking at from an enterprise sustainability standpoint. These questions within the RFI have now been standardized. So that's something that we've got ready for the industry, and I'm just so excited for us to start to action that.
Can I ask a question of
Yeah.
you? I'm curious how let's say in pitches, right, when you guys are pitching new business, how involved are you and your team? And do you see that clients are finding your role as a differentiator at a holding company level from others, and how interested do you find clients who are making a decision about moving to a new agency? How interested are they in the existence of your role and the focus of the holding company on sustainability?
I mean, every new business RFI includes ESG, sustainability. They want to understand what we're doing. I will say, I was on a panel yesterday with a person who had a role, CMO and Chief Sustainability Officer, can join the role. And I love seeing that because there's an increased focus on sustainability, and I think we're going to see, and there's going to be a watershed moment in 2025, because that EU regulation is going to impact pretty much every business that is of a certain size. So whether it's as important or imperative to business now, certainly will be next year. So we're gearing up for that, absolutely.
I completely agree, and I think that this is why this is such an interesting point in time, because everyone's very much on the same page about where we need to go as an industry. But as you said, Phil, change management is really difficult, especially when there are very real concerns that brands are navigating. So how can, and this is a question for the group, how can tech platforms, consultancies, agencies, partners, et cetera, how can we develop solutions that help speed up this change? What do you think are the biggest things missing right now from a solution perspective that could really help move us along more quickly on this journey to a more sustainable, responsible future?
I mean, I'll give huge credit to we have a head of sustainability who's massively active. We published our responsible business report a few months ago. The apportionment of Scope 3 output to media was a lot more than I think anyone would have thought. It was up there in some of the highest numbers, but that's a spend-based calculation, so it's not necessarily 100% accurate. But if you just put that in front of a lot of marketeers, I think that would be a real building platform to then think about. I'm kind of like thinking it's the equivalent of privacy, like with GDPR and all of that. Do you need everyone to be upskilled, or do you want the capability to sit with a specialist team? And I think that's what we found with privacy. We had legal and compliance and teams very much kind of the centre of excellence for that, but everyone, it needs to permeate for everyone. So if you want to do a first-party data value exchange with consumers, you need to know some core things before setting that up. Same with what can I do in my role as a brand manager or a media lead or a creative production lead to make my small part. Like, we all recycle, I'm sure. Like, we don't do that because there's a ticker in the kitchen telling you, like, you have just like saved it. You just do it. You just do it because it's habit. I think that's what it needs to be, habits. In terms of what, if it's kind of worth anything, advice for news brands, I think use the technology that's available to give brands a better understanding around your emissions per attention as a competitive advantage versus Meta and YouTube, because you will have a far better emissions per attentive second ratio than Meta. But if we just look at you or look at anyone in just emissions, then we're going to have a real race to the bottom, as opposed to emissions per something, emissions per view, emissions per attention, emissions per something. I was talking to Greenbiz yesterday about this very thing, who are doing some really interesting stuff here. They're very much pushing the idea of emissions per something, because otherwise it would just be the CPM conversation again, 10% lower, 10% lower, 10% lower, until we stop advertising.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't want that. I think the other, like, you've got two kind of key constituents that we're focused on, which is, of course, our partners. So we want to work with our partners. We developed the Media Responsibility Index a few years ago, and we're in our 5th issuance of this. And this is something that we've created for us to have a meaningful conversation and vetting and evaluating of our partners' performance on key areas of focus, including safety, inclusivity, but sustainability. So there's questions that I mentioned that are being codified as part of the industry standard. We developed those at IPG Mediabrands for MRI, and now that is something that has been adapted and adopted for the global process that the industry has taken on. So it becomes a scorecard, but we're not wagging a finger and saying, this is, punitive. In fact, we want to work with our partners to help them identify ways that they can be more responsible. So we have developed a program, the Climate Action Accelerator Program, and this is a suite of solutions that are available to our partners and our clients at a discount. The other key constituent, of course, is our clients. So these are solutions like measurement. You perfectly timed your arrival here, Richard, who represents 51 to Carbon Zero, which is a measurement partner that we work with. We also work with Schneider Electric for renewable electricity, and we're working with Carbon Direct for highly durable carbon offsets, and Cornell University for research, because we know innovation is going to be critical here. So that's really where we're working with our partners. We're working with the industry to help them improve their scores, but also that's available to our clients that don't maybe have those solutions available today.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that some mass education on the publisher side would be incredibly helpful, coming in and helping people understand why this is important outside of the outside of sort of the social responsibility you might feel. Why is this important to the business? Why is this something that we as a publisher, we as a news brand, really need to be thinking about? And I think, Phil, to your point, if you put it through the lens of not only is this the right thing to do, sure, but this is an opportunity for us to edge out the platforms. We are always going to be more sustainable. We are always going to be, it is always going to be a better buy through that specific lens, and then helping us understand how we can continue to be better and why it's important to be better. I think mass education there is going to, will go a long way, especially coming from buyers.
Agreed, and I think that it's a really important point that so much of this is about the value that it's delivering. It's not just we want to support these things that we feel good about, we want the future to be better, which we all do, but if we can tie it to near-term value for each constituent, I think that's where real change really begins.
That's right, and to your point, Phil, earlier about everybody being under increased scrutiny and pressure to do more with less, it's easy to do the same old things that have worked before. And something that I talk about a lot when we talk about, you know, the importance of investing in news. I mean, sure, yes, we need news and quality journalism and reporting for a functioning democratic society, right? Like, we need that. But I don't necessarily expect that CMOs are thinking about that on a daily basis. They're thinking about their bottom line, they're thinking about their stock price, they're thinking about their jobs. And so we need to find another path in, and that's what the Stagwell study gives us, the data to be able to say, okay, we can all agree this is the right thing to do, sure, but let me tell you how this is actually going to change your business. And I think that's the direction that you need to go in, yes, we can all collectively agree that this is great for the environment, this is great for society, but you have to prove better business outcomes, and I think that's what we've been able to do, and that's what you guys are working towards.
I mean, purpose and profit. Right?
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
absolutely.
There, exactly.
And it has to be easy.
It has to be easy. That's exactly right. You can't. We have to pair ease and lack of friction, and I think honestly that's also from a news perspective why we got ourselves into the situation it's in. It was easier to apply block lists that just kept going to all programmatic spend. And then you got to a place where you couldn't scale any PMP on a news platform. So we know that ease helps shift the dollars, so we need to find a way to make it easy.
And I think that's where tech platforms can really add something to the conversation as well, is making sure that the ease of use is there on both sides of the equation and adding value to each end of the supply chain. So I'm being cognizant of time because I know we want to leave a little bit for Q&A as well. Are there any questions from the audience for this great group of people before closing thoughts? We covered so much information and it's just all so clear.
Such a quick 30 minutes.
Yeah, it really flew by. Any final thoughts on this topic as you're closing up your can and looking to the back half of the year? Top things you're looking forward to moving forward in this conversation?
I think programmatic helped a lot of things, but it broke relationships, it broke conversations with publishers about benefits and opportunities. It just, you say demographic targeting, you apply to exclusion list, and you were happy with kind of hopefully the positive KPIs you got. So if brands can go away and think about like the types of conversations they want to have about how to curate those inclusion lists or create those programmatic guaranteed deals, to showcase what is the window for the great work out there, because you put great work, you get half a second on Instagram, what was the point? So that would be it. It'll be taking away the fact that all this great work needs a platform and a window to be shown through, and we're just not very good at having conversations about where to put it, I think.
Yeah, and I think I'm looking forward to hopefully some change happening as a result of all the conversations that are happening here, and I think this is the first time that we've had real data points to back up what we've talked about, and our study with Stagwell is not the only one, so there are more of them. Lumen did one, and so what I'm excited about is the existence of this conversation with anchors in data. What I am really hopeful about is that all the things that we talk about here making its way home with us, to our teams, to the people who are in the day-to-day functional roles, to actually make some of this change that we're talking about happen.
I think responsible media requires accountability. And now that we have that common framework, I'm excited for that. But I think that one of the things that I'm going to take away from this panel is the importance of news media can't be underestimated. Like, we are living through an existential crisis of mis and disinformation adversely impacting people's opinions, how they vote, how they live their lives. I know in the climate crisis, I think about this every single day. So ensuring that we're working with notable, reputable news media and supporting and reaching that 11% of audience, like that's going to be a key takeaway for me. And I think holding ourselves accountable to ensuring that we are not only racing to the bottom line from an emission standpoint, but that we're actually being responsible with how we're investing, because holistically there are significant outcomes and impacts that we have with the many millions and billions of dollars that we're spending on behalf of our clients. Huge opportunity, huge responsibility.
Absolutely, I could not agree more, and I have to say I'm inspired after hearing all these points of view, and I think that there's so much positive change that really can happen when you have this value chain of partners working together in lockstep and speaking the same language. So thank you all so much for taking the time at your very busy can, and thank you to the audience for joining us.